Princess Amelia woke up that Tuesday morning feeling trapped, just like every other day. The golden walls of her bedroom felt more like prison bars than luxury. She stared at her schedule lying on the antique desk. Another day filled with boring meetings, fancy lunches, and people who only smiled because they had to. "Your Royal Highness, you have the ribbon-cutting ceremony at 10, her assistant announced through the door. Amelia rolled her eyes. Another ribbon, another fake smile, another group of people treating her like she was made of glass. But today was different. Today, she had secretly added something to her schedule that nobody knew about. A visit to the Sunshine Community Center in the old part of town. She had read about their work with kids who didn't have much, and something inside her heart pulled her toward helping them. Amelia looked through her closet full of designer dresses and picked out her simplest clothes, jeans, a plain sweater, and old sneakers. She tied her long brown hair back in a simple ponytail and looked in the mirror. For the first time in months, she looked like a regular person. The drive to the community center took her through parts of the city she had never seen before. Small. Houses with tiny gardens, kids playing in the streets, mothers hanging laundry on lines between buildings. Everything looked so real, so alive. Her royal car felt too fancy for these streets, so she asked her driver to drop her off 2 blocks away. Walking those last 2 blocks felt like entering a different world. Nobody stared at her or whispered behind their hands. Nobody knew who she was. The feeling was both scary and wonderful at the same time. The Sunshine Community Center was an old brick building with colorful paintings on the walls outside. Kids had drawn flowers, rainbows, and stick figures of families holding hands. The pictures were crooked and the colors went outside the lines, but they were more beautiful than any expensive art in the palace. Amelia pushed open the heavy wooden door and stepped inside. The smell hit her first, not fancy perfume or cleaning products, but something warm and real. It smelled like cookies baking, kids playing, and people who cared about each other. "Can I help you?" A man's voice came from behind her. She turned around and saw a tall guy with kind eyes and a gentle smile. He was wearing jeans with paint stains and a t-shirt that said, "Kids are our future." His black hair was a little messy, like he had been running his hands through it while working. "I'm here to volunteer," Amelia said, her heart beating fast. She realized she had never introduced herself without using her royal title before. "Great! I'm David Chen. We can always use extra hands around here." He didn't bow or look nervous. He just smiled like she was any normal person walking in off the street. "What's your name?" Amelia panicked for a second. She couldn't use her real name. "I'm Amy," she said quickly, using her childhood nickname that only her grandmother had called her. "Nice to meet you, Amy. Have you worked with kids before?" David started walking toward a room where she could hear children laughing and playing. "Not really," she admitted, following him down a hallway covered with more colorful drawings. "But I want to learn." David stopped and looked at her with surprise. Most volunteers came in acting like they knew everything already. "That's honest. I like that. Come on, let me show you around." The main activity room was chaos in the best possible way. About 20 kids between ages 5 and 12 were sitting at small tables creating art projects. Some were painting, others were gluing pieces of paper together, and a few were building towers with blocks. Paint was everywhere, on the tables, on the kids, even on the walls. "Kids, we have a new volunteer today. This is Amy," David announced. The children looked up with curious eyes and paint-covered hands. "Hi, Amy," they called out together, then immediately went back to their projects. No big deal, no special treatment, just normal kids being normal kids. "Today we're working on family portraits," David explained, leading her to a table where 3 kids were struggling with their paintbrushes. "The idea is to help them express what family means to them. Some of these kids don't have traditional families. So we let them paint whoever makes them feel loved and safe. Amelia sat down next to a little girl who was trying to paint what looked like a dog wearing a crown. "That's beautiful," she said softly. "Tell me about your picture." The girl, who couldn't have been more than 6, looked up with serious brown eyes. "This is Princess, my grandma's dog. She takes care of me when Grandma works late. She's my family, too." Something warm and real filled Amelia's chest. In the palace, family was about bloodlines and traditions and rules. Here, family was about love and feeling safe. "Princess sounds very special," she said. "She is. She knows when I'm sad and comes to sit with me." "Do you have a dog?" Amelia thought about the royal pets, fancy breeds that lived in special areas of the palace and were cared for by professional handlers. "Not really," she said honestly. For the next 2 hours, Amelia helped kids with their art projects, cleaned up spilled paint, and listened to their stories. She heard about grandparents who made the best soup, older brothers who protected them from bullies, and neighbors who became like family. Every story was different, but they all had one thing in common: love that didn't care about money or titles or what other people thought. David worked beside her the whole time, and she watched how he talked to each child. He remembered their names, their favorite colors, their fears and dreams. When little Tommy got frustrated because his painting didn't look like what he wanted, David sat with him patiently. "Art isn't about making it perfect," David told Tommy gently. "It's about showing what's in your heart. And your heart is pretty amazing." Amelia had never heard anyone talk like that before. In her world, everything had to be perfect. Perfect posture, perfect words, perfect smiles. But here, being real was more important than being perfect. As the afternoon ended and the kids started getting picked up by parents and guardians, David began cleaning up the art supplies. Amelia stayed to help without being asked. "You're really good with them," David said, washing paintbrushes in the sink. "The kids liked you. They don't always warm up to new people that fast." "They're amazing," Amelia said, and meant it completely. "I've never met kids so honest and creative." "That's what I love about this job," David said, his eyes lighting up. "These kids teach me something new every day. They don't care if you're rich or poor, what you look like, or where you come from. They just care if you're kind to them." Amelia helped stack the tiny chairs. She realized something incredible had happened. For the first time in her entire life, she had spent hours being completely herself. No royal duties, no fake conversations, no pretending to be interested in things that bored her. Just real moments with real people doing something that actually mattered. "Would you like to come back next week?" David asked as they finished cleaning. "We're starting a reading program and we could use someone to help the younger kids with their books." Amelia's heart jumped with excitement, but then reality hit her. How could she explain regular trips to a community center? How could she keep this secret? But looking around at the colorful walls covered with children's art, she knew she had to try. "Yes," she said without thinking about the complications. "I'll be here." David smiled that same genuine smile that had welcomed her hours earlier. "Great. Same time next Tuesday?" As Amelia walked back toward where her driver was waiting, she felt like she was floating. Her hands still had traces of paint under her fingernails. Her sweater smelled like cookies and crayons, and her heart felt fuller than it had in years. For the first time in her life, someone had looked at her and seen just Amy. Not a princess. Not a title, not a duty. Just a person who wanted to help and belong somewhere real. She had no idea how she would manage to come back without getting caught, but she knew she had to find a way. This feeling of being truly alive was worth any risk. 3 months had passed since Amelia first walked into the Sunshine Community Center, and her Tuesday afternoons had become the highlight of her week. She had gotten better at sneaking away from the palace, telling her security team she needed quiet time in the private gardens, while actually slipping out through the old servant's entrance that nobody used anymore. Every Tuesday, she transformed from Princess Amelia into just Amy, the volunteer who helped kids with reading and art projects. Her relationship with David had grown slowly and naturally, like a flower blooming in secret. It started with small conversations during snack time. David would tell her about his childhood, how his parents had moved to the country with nothing but hope and determination. His father worked 2 jobs while going to night school, and his mother cleaned offices to pay for David's education. They had taught him that helping others wasn't just a job, it was a way of life. "My parents always said that the best way to find happiness is to help someone else find theirs," David told her one afternoon as they watched the kids play outside. "I used to think that was just something parents say, but working here, I see it's true." Amelia listened to his stories with wonder. In her world, people helped others because it was expected or because it looked good in newspapers. But David's family helped people because it felt right in their hearts. She had never met anyone like him. As weeks went by, their conversations became longer and more personal. David shared his dreams of opening more community centers in different neighborhoods. Amelia found herself talking about things she had never told anyone. How lonely it felt to be surrounded by people who only cared about her title. How she sometimes stayed awake at night wondering if anyone would like her, if she was just a regular person. "I think you're being too hard on yourself," David said gently. "The kids here love you and they don't care about anything except that you're kind to them. That tells me everything I need to know about who you really are." One rainy Tuesday in October, David surprised her. "Amy, would you like to grab coffee with me after we finish here? There's this little place down the street that makes amazing hot chocolate." Amelia's heart started racing. This sounded like he was asking her on a date. A real date, where someone wanted to spend time with her just because they enjoyed her company. "I'd love to," she said, trying to keep her voice calm. The coffee shop was tiny and warm, with mismatched chairs and tables that looked like they had stories to tell. The owner, an elderly woman with silver hair, greeted David like he was family. "David, your usual table is free. And who is this lovely young lady?" "This is Amy, Mrs. Peterson. She volunteers with me at the center." Mrs. Peterson brought them steaming mugs of hot chocolate topped with real whipped cream and tiny marshmallows. Amelia wrapped her hands around the warm mug and felt something she had never experienced before, the simple joy of being somewhere cozy with someone who made her feel safe. "Tell me something about yourself that nobody else knows," David said with a playful smile. Amelia panicked for a moment. Everything interesting about her life was connected to being a princess. "I love to cook," she said finally, "but I'm terrible at it. I once tried to make cookies and they came out looking like little rocks." David laughed and the sound made her heart feel light. "I love cooking too. Maybe I could teach you sometime. My grandmother taught me to make the best dumplings you've ever tasted." As autumn turned into winter, their coffee dates became a regular thing. David showed her parts of the city she had never seen, small bookstores where cats slept between the shelves, parks where old men played chess on wooden tables, markets where vendors called out in different languages and the air smelled like spices from around the world. Walking through these neighborhoods with David, Amelia discovered a version of herself she never knew existed. She laughed louder, smiled more freely, and felt curious about everything around her. When David pointed out interesting buildings or told her stories about the people they passed, she listened with real interest instead of the polite attention she gave at royal functions. One evening in December, as they walked through a neighborhood decorated with twinkling lights for the holidays, David stopped suddenly and turned to her. "Amy, I need to tell you something," he said, his breath making small clouds in the cold air. "These past few months have been the best I've had in years. Being with you feels so natural, so right. I think I'm falling in love with you." Amelia felt her world stop and start again all at once. Someone loved her. Not Princess Amelia with her title and wealth and royal bloodline. Someone loved Amy, the girl who helped kids with art projects and burned cookies and laughed too loud at his jokes. "I love you too," she whispered, and meant it more than she had ever meant anything in her life. David stepped closer and gently touched her face with his gloved hand. "Really?" "Really," she said, looking into his eyes that reflected the holiday. Lights around them. Their first kiss happened right there on the sidewalk, under a streetlight decorated with a red ribbon. It was soft and sweet and perfect, and Amelia thought that if her life ended right then, she would be completely happy. But as wonderful as that moment was, it also filled her with fear, because she knew that loving David meant living a lie. Every day, the secret felt heavier. When he talked about the future, about meeting her family or her friends, she had to make excuses. When he invited her to his apartment for dinner, she had to pretend she had other commitments. The hardest part was watching how honest and open he was with her, while she hid the biggest part of who she was. David told her about his fears, his dreams, his embarrassing childhood stories. He introduced her to his friends, his co-workers, even his parents when they visited for the holidays. David's parents were warm and welcoming, treating her like she was already part of their family. His mother insisted on packing extra food for her to take home, and his father told her funny stories about David as a little boy. Being with them felt like being wrapped in a cozy blanket on a cold day. "Our son talks about you all the time," his mother said while they washed dishes together after dinner. "We can see he's very happy. You're good for him." Amelia wanted to cry, but not from sadness. She had never been around a family that felt so real, so full of genuine love and acceptance. These people cared about her because of how she treated their son, not because of any title or royal bloodline. By February, Amelia knew she couldn't keep living this double life much longer. The lies were eating at her heart, and she could see that David was starting to notice when she couldn't answer simple questions about her job or her family. One evening, as they sat in their favorite coffee shop, David reached across the table and took her hand. "Amy, I love you, and I want to build a real future with you. But sometimes I feel like you're holding something back. Is there something you're not telling me?" Amelia looked into his trusting eyes and felt her heart breaking. She loved this man more than she had ever loved anyone or anything. But she also knew that telling him the truth might destroy everything they had built together. "There are things about my life that are complicated," she said carefully, "but my feelings for you are the most real thing I've ever experienced." David squeezed her hand gently. "Whatever it is, we can work through it together. I'm not going anywhere." As they walked home that night, Amelia made a decision that terrified her. She had to tell David the truth about who she really was. She loved him too much to keep lying, and she loved herself too much to keep hiding. She just hoped that when he learned she was a princess, he would still see the Amy he had fallen in love with underneath the crown. The moment Amelia had been dreading finally arrived on a cold March evening. She had invited David to the small park where they often walked together, knowing she needed to tell him the truth in a place that felt safe for both of them. "David, I need to tell you something important," she began, her hands shaking despite the warm spring air. "Something I should have told you months ago." David sat down beside her on their favorite bench, the one under the old oak tree where they had shared so many conversations. "You're scaring me a little, Amy. What's going on?" Amelia took a deep breath and looked into his kind eyes. "My real name isn't Amy. It's Amelia. Princess Amelia." David stared at her for a long moment, his face showing confusion, then disbelief, then something that looked like hurt. "What do you mean, princess?" "I mean, I'm the daughter of Queen Isabella. I live in the royal palace. I have security guards and official duties and a life that's completely different from what I've shown you. The words tumbled out of her mouth like water breaking through a dam. I've been lying to you about who I am since the day we met. David stood up suddenly and walked a few steps away from her, running his hands through his hair. This is some kind of joke, right? You're not serious. I'm completely serious. Amelia pulled out her phone and showed him a recent newspaper photo of herself at a royal function. This is me. This is who I really am. David looked at the photo, then at her, then back at the photo. His face went through so many emotions that Amelia felt like she was watching her heart break in real time. You're actually a princess, he said quietly, and you've been pretending to be a regular person this whole time. I wasn't pretending to be someone else, Amelia said desperately. When I'm with you, when I'm Amy, that's the most real I've ever been. Everything I've told you about my feelings, about loving you, that's all true. David sat back down on the bench, but this time he kept distance between them. How much of what you told me was a lie? Your job, your family, your life. Was any of it real? My feelings for you are real. My love for the work at the community center is real. The way I feel when I'm with you, like I can actually breathe. For the first time in my life, that's all real. Tears started rolling down Amelia's cheeks. I know I should have told you sooner, but I was scared. I was scared you'd treat me differently, or that you'd only see the princess instead of seeing me. David was quiet for a long time, staring at the ground. I need time to think about this, he said finally. This changes everything, and I don't know how to process it. David, please don't walk away from us. I know I messed up by not telling you, but what we have is worth fighting for, is it? David looked at her with eyes full of pain. How can we have a real relationship when your entire life is something I can't be part of? You're going to be queen someday. I'm a social worker who can barely pay his rent. We live in completely different worlds. But we found each other anyway, Amelia said softly. That has to mean something. David stood up again. I need some time to think. I'll call you when I'm ready to talk. He walked away without looking back, leaving Amelia alone on the bench under the oak tree. She sat there crying until it got dark, feeling like her heart had been torn in half. For 5 days, David didn't call or text. Amelia went through the motions of her royal duties like a robot, cutting ribbons and attending meetings while her mind was completely somewhere else. She kept checking her phone every few minutes, hoping to see his name on the screen. On the 6th day, as she sat in her room staring out the window, her phone finally rang. Can we meet? David's voice sounded tired. Same place as before. When Amelia arrived at the park, David was already sitting on their bench. He looked like he hadn't slept much, and her heart ached seeing the exhaustion on his face. I've been thinking about everything you told me, he said as she sat down beside him. And I keep coming back to one thing. When you were helping those kids with their art projects, when you were listening to their stories and making them feel important, that wasn't fake. That was you being exactly who you are inside. It was, Amelia said quietly. That's who I really am when nobody's watching. But I also can't ignore that you lied to me for months. Every time I asked about your family or your job, every time I shared something personal with you while you were hiding who you really were, that hurt me. Amelia nodded, tears starting again. I know. I was wrong to keep it from you for so long. I was selfish because I didn't want to lose what we had. The thing is, David continued, I understand why you did it. After thinking about it, I realize you probably never get to just be yourself. Everyone must want something from you or treat you like you're not a real person. That's exactly how it feels, Amelia whispered. David reached over and took her hand. I love you, Amelia. Not Amy the volunteer, not Princess Amelia from the newspapers, but you. The person who cares so much about those kids that she risks getting in trouble just to spend time with them. The person who burns cookies and laughs too loud and gets paint under her fingernails. Relief flooded through Amelia like warm sunshine. I love you too. More than I ever thought it was possible to love someone. But if we're going to make this work, things have to change. No more lies, no more secrets. If we're together, we're really together. Which means dealing with all the complicated parts of your life? I want that, Amelia said. I want to be completely honest with you about everything. Over the next few weeks, they slowly rebuilt their relationship on a foundation of complete truth. Amelia told David about the pressures of royal life, the loneliness of growing up in the palace, and her fears about never being able to live a normal life. David shared his worries about being good enough for her and his concerns about how different their backgrounds were. But they also discovered that love could bridge those differences. David started learning about royal protocol and history, not because he had to, but because he wanted to understand Amelia's world. Amelia learned about David's community work, and even started helping him write grant proposals for the community center, using skills she had learned in her political studies. The hardest part was keeping their relationship secret from everyone else. Amelia's security team had started noticing her unexplained absences, and she had to get creative about meeting David without being followed. They started meeting in different places each time. Small restaurants in neighborhoods where nobody would recognize her, quiet museums during off-peak hours, and David's apartment when she could slip away unnoticed. One evening in late April, as they cooked dinner together in David's tiny kitchen, he brought up something that had been on both their minds. Amelia, we can't keep this secret forever. Eventually, people are going to find out about us. I know, she said, stirring the soup they were making. I've been thinking about that too. My mother is already asking questions about where I've been spending my time. What do you think will happen when everyone finds out? Amelia set down the spoon and turned to face him. Honestly, it's going to be chaos. The media will go crazy. My mother will be furious, and people will have very strong opinions about us being together. Are you ready for that? Amelia looked around David's small apartment, with its second-hand furniture and walls covered with photos of the kids from the community center. She thought about how happy she felt here, how much more herself she was with him than she had ever been in the palace. With you? I'm ready for anything. David pulled her into his arms. Then we'll face it together, whatever comes. That night, they made a decision that would change both their lives forever. They decided to stop hiding their love and start fighting for it, no matter what obstacles the world threw at them. Neither of them knew that a photographer had been following Amelia for the past week, and that their first public photos together would be on every newspaper front page by morning. Amelia woke up to her phone buzzing non-stop at 6 in the morning. Confused and still half asleep, she reached for it and saw dozens of missed calls and text messages. Her heart stopped when she saw the first message from her lady-in-waiting. Your Highness, you need to see the morning papers. Now! With shaking hands, Amelia opened her news app. The headline hit her like a punch to the stomach. Royal Romance, Princess Amelia's secret love affair with common man. Below it was a crystal-clear photo of her and David holding hands outside his apartment building the night before. She scrolled through article after article, each one more invasive than the last. Who is the mystery man? Princess slumming with social worker. Royal family in crisis as princess dates below her station. The photos showed them cooking together through David's window, walking in the park, even their first kiss under the streetlight months ago. Amelia's hands were shaking so badly she could barely hold her phone. How long had they been watching? Her? How many private moments had been stolen and sold to newspapers? Before she could process it all, her bedroom door burst open. Queen Isabella stood there in her silk robe, holding a stack of newspapers, her face showing a mixture of fury and disappointment that made Amelia feel like a child again. Explain this to me, the Queen said. her voice deadly calm as she threw the papers onto Amelia's bed. "Explain to me how my daughter, the future queen of this nation, has been sneaking around with some nobody while lying to her family and her country." "Mother, it's not what you think." "It's exactly what I think." The queen's composure cracked. "Do you have any idea what you've done? The damage to our family's reputation? The questions people are asking about your judgment and your fitness to rule?" Amelia stood up, still in her pajamas, feeling more vulnerable than she ever had in her life. "I fell in love, Mother. I fell in love with a good man who makes me want to be a better person." "A good man?" Queen Isabella laughed bitterly. "A social worker who lives in a tiny apartment and probably makes less in a year than we spend on one royal dinner? What could you possibly have in common with someone like that?" "Everything that matters," Amelia said, finding her courage. "He's kind and honest and cares about people. He doesn't want anything from me except my love. When I'm with him, I feel like the person I was meant to be." "The person you were meant to be is a queen. You have responsibilities, duties to your country and your family. You can't just throw that all away for some fantasy romance." Over the next few hours, the situation got worse. The palace phones rang constantly with calls from reporters, government officials, and other royal families. Amelia's security team had to escort her everywhere as photographers camped outside the palace gates. Every news channel in the country was discussing her relationship, with experts debating whether she should give up her royal title or end the relationship. Meanwhile, David was dealing with his own nightmare. Reporters had surrounded his apartment building and the community center. His phone wouldn't stop ringing, and he couldn't leave his apartment without being followed by cameras and people shouting questions at him. When Amelia finally managed to call him that afternoon, his voice sounded exhausted and stressed. "David, I'm so sorry. I never wanted this to happen to you." "I know you didn't," he replied, but she could hear the strain in his voice. "But Amelia, this is crazy. There are people outside my building asking my neighbors about my personal life. I had to call in sick to work because I can't even get to the community center without being mobbed." "We can get through this," Amelia said, though she wasn't sure she believed it herself. "It will calm down eventually." Will it? Because from where I'm sitting, it looks like this is just the beginning. That evening, Queen Isabella called Amelia to her private office. The room felt cold and formal, nothing like the warm conversations they used to have when Amelia was younger. "I've been in meetings all day with the Prime Minister and our advisors," the Queen began. "The consensus is clear. This relationship needs to end immediately." "No," Amelia said firmly. "I won't end it." "Then you're more foolish than I thought. Do you think this man really loves you? Or do you think he loves the idea of being connected to royalty? How do you know he didn't tip off the photographers himself? David would never do that. He hates all this attention as much as I do. People do desperate things for money and fame, Amelia. You're being naive." "I'm being hopeful," Amelia shot back. "I'm believing that real love exists, even in our world of politics and protocol." The Queen stood up and walked to the window overlooking the palace gardens. "I forbid you from seeing him again. If you continue this relationship, there will be consequences." "What kind of consequences?" "The kind that affect your future as a member of this family." That night, Amelia couldn't sleep. She kept thinking about David alone in his apartment, probably wondering if their love was worth all this chaos. She thought about the kids at the community center who might not understand why their volunteer Amy wasn't coming anymore. She thought about the life she had built with David, simple and real and full of genuine happiness. The next morning brought even worse news. Someone had leaked David's personal information online, including his address, phone number, and details about his family. His parents were getting harassing calls, and his father had to leave work early because reporters showed up at his office. When Amelia saw David that afternoon in a secret meeting arranged by her most trusted security guard, he looked like he hadn't slept in days. "This has to stop," he said before she could even sit down. "My family is being dragged into this mess because of me. My parents came to this country for a better life, and now they're being treated like criminals because their son fell in love with a princess. We can protect them, Amelia said desperately. We can get them security, move them somewhere safe until this dies down. Listen to yourself, David said sadly. You're talking about moving my parents into hiding because we want to be together. Is this the kind of life you want? Always running, always hiding, always causing problems for the people we love? I want a life with you, Amelia said, tears starting to flow. I don't care about anything else. David took her hands in his, and she could see that he was crying too. I love you more than I've ever loved anyone. But love isn't enough if it destroys everything around it. Don't say that. Please don't give up on us. I'm not giving up. I'm fighting for us in the only way I know how. David stood up and pulled something out of his pocket. It was a small velvet box. I bought this 2 weeks ago, before any of this happened. I was going to ask you to marry me. Amelia's heart stopped. David? Marry me, Amelia. Not in secret, not in hiding, but openly and honestly. If we're going to be together, let's be together completely. Let's show the world that love is stronger than tradition or class or what other people think. Amelia stared at the ring box, her mind racing. Marrying David would mean choosing love over duty completely. It would mean standing up to her mother, the government, and centuries of royal tradition. It would mean risking everything she had ever known for something beautiful and uncertain. Yes, she whispered. Yes, I'll marry you. They hugged each other tightly, both crying and laughing at the same time. They had no idea how they would make it work, but they knew they would face whatever came next together. What they didn't know was that a palace staff member had been listening outside the door, and within an hour, news of their engagement would reach Queen Isabella. When Queen Isabella heard about the engagement, her reaction was swift and decisive. Within hours, Amelia found herself summoned to the throne room, not her mother's private office, but the formal room where official royal business was conducted. The message was clear. This was no longer a family discussion. You will not marry this man, the Queen declared from her throne, her voice echoing in the vast room. I forbid it as your queen and as your mother. Amelia stood in the center of the room, feeling small but determined. I'm going to marry him whether you approve or not. I love him, and he loves me for who I really am. Then you leave me no choice. The Queen's voice was ice cold. If you go through with this marriage, you will renounce your claim to the throne. You will give up your royal title, your place in the succession, everything. For a moment, Amelia felt the weight of centuries of royal history pressing down on her. She thought about her ancestors, the crown that would have been hers, the country she would have served as queen. Then she thought about David's smile, the children at the community center, and the person she became when she was with him. Then that's what I'll do, she said quietly. The Queen's face showed surprise for the first time. She had expected this threat to bring her daughter back in line. You would throw away your birthright for this man? I would choose happiness over duty. I would choose love over a crown that comes with a life I don't want. The next few weeks were the most difficult of Amelia's life. The palace released a statement saying that Princess Amelia was taking time to consider her future, which only made the media attention more intense. Every day brought new headlines, new opinions, and new pressure from all sides. Some people supported her choice, calling it romantic and brave. Others criticized her harshly, saying she was selfish and irresponsible. The government was split, with some officials saying the royal family needed to modernize and others insisting that tradition must be upheld. Through it all, David stood by her side. He faced hostile interviews where reporters tried to make him look like a gold digger or someone taking advantage of a naive princess. He answered every question with dignity and honesty, talking about his love for Amelia and his respect for the royal family, even when they didn't show him the same respect. The turning point came during a charity event that Amelia had committed to months earlier, a fundraiser for children's hospitals that she couldn't cancel without disappointing sick kids and their families. David attended as her guest, and it was the first time they appeared together publicly since their engagement. Watching them that night, something shifted in public opinion. David didn't act like someone trying to use his connection to royalty for personal gain. Instead, he spent the evening talking to parents of sick children, listening to their stories, and learning about the hospital's needs. When a little girl asked him to read her a story, he sat on the floor in his formal suit and read to her with the same gentle voice Amelia had fallen in love with at the community center. Queen Isabella watched from across the room as foreign dignitaries and wealthy donors gravitated toward David. He had a natural ability to make people feel heard and valued, regardless of their status or wealth. She saw hardened politicians smile genuinely for the first time in years as David asked them about their families instead of their policies. But the moment that changed everything happened near the end of the evening. A young reporter, trying to create drama, approached the Queen with a challenging question. "Your Majesty, there's been speculation that you disapprove of your daughter's choice. That gentleman over there with Princess Amelia, who exactly is he to you?" Queen Isabella looked across the room at David, who was helping Amelia distribute small gifts to the children who had attended the event. She watched as he knelt down to talk to a shy little boy, making him laugh for the first time all evening. She saw the way Amelia looked at him, not with the desperate need she had sometimes seen in royal marriages of convenience, but with genuine joy and partnership. The Queen turned back to the reporter, and for the first time in months, she smiled a real smile. "That young man," she said with quiet pride, "is the person who makes my daughter truly happy." The reporter pressed further. "But surely you have concerns about the appropriateness of the match, given the difference in their backgrounds?" Queen Isabella straightened her shoulders and looked the reporter directly in the eyes. "I have watched that man tonight show more genuine care for people than I've seen from many so-called nobility. He doesn't need a title to act with honor and compassion." The exchange was captured by photographers and became the headline story the next morning. Queen Isabella endorses daughter's choice. The formal announcement came 2 weeks later. In a televised address to the nation, Queen Isabella spoke directly to her people. "The monarchy has survived for centuries by adapting to serve the needs of our changing world," she said, looking directly into the camera. "My daughter, Princess Amelia, has shown us that true nobility comes not from bloodlines, but from service to others and genuine care for our fellow human beings. It is my honor to announce that Princess Amelia will retain her royal title upon her marriage to David Chen, and that David will be granted the title of Duke, recognizing his commitment to public service and his contribution to our royal family." The wedding took place 3 months later in the palace gardens, with children from the Sunshine Community Center serving as flower children and David's parents walking him down the aisle alongside Queen Isabella walking with Amelia. It was a ceremony that mixed royal tradition with personal meaning, formal protocol with genuine emotion, but the real celebration happened at the reception, when Queen Isabella found herself in conversation with a visiting ambassador who had been watching David work the room with natural diplomatic skill. "Your Majesty," the ambassador said, "I must say that young man has quite a gift for connecting with people." "Who is he exactly?" Queen Isabella looked across the room at her new son-in-law, who was deep in conversation with several world leaders about expanding international cooperation on children's welfare programs. Princess Amelia stood beside him, glowing with happiness, as she watched the man she loved use his natural abilities to serve their shared mission of helping others. The Queen turned back to the ambassador with a smile that held years of worry finally resolved, months of resistance finally overcome. and a future full of new possibilities. "That remarkable young man," she said with unmistakable pride and love, "is the human my daughter married." In the years that followed, David and Amelia revolutionized what it meant to be royal. They split their time between official duties and hands-on charity work, opening community centers in underserved neighborhoods and creating programs that brought together people from all walks of life. David's background helped him connect with ordinary citizens in ways that traditional royalty never could, while Amelia's position gave their work a platform and resources it never would have had otherwise. Their love story became proof that the best fairy tales aren't about princes saving princesses, but about two people choosing to build something beautiful together, regardless of what the world says is possible. And every Tuesday afternoon, they still volunteered at the Sunshine Community Center, reading stories to children and helping with art projects, just like they did when they were Amy and David, two people who found each other in a world that said they didn't belong together.